Here's the rewritten version in simpler English. Pam Bondi was laughed at, ignored, and dared to prove herself on stage. But what happened next shocked everyone and changed the story completely. It all started during a podcast episode that no one expected to go viral. The guest was Jackson Weller, an indie rock musician from Portland, known for his strong opinions and sharp sense of humor. He was in the middle of telling a story about playing at a fundraiser when the host asked, "Ever run into anyone from politics backstage?" Jackson chuckled, took a sip of his drink, and leaned into the mic. "Pam Bondi was at one of those events," he said with a smirk. "Nice lady, I guess, but come on, she looked at the grand piano like it was IKEA furniture. I doubt she can tell middle C from a cup of coffee." The room burst into laughter. His audience, mostly young, left-leaning, and skeptical of politicians, loved it. Jackson was known for making comments like this, and most people didn't take him too seriously. But this time, his words stuck. Clips of the moment spread fast on social media. People shared memes with captions like "Jackson destroys Pam Bondi with a musical burn" and "Pam, do you even know what a piano is?" Pam didn't respond, not right away. In Tampa, she sat at her kitchen counter when her phone buzzed. Her niece had sent her the clip with a laughing emoji. Pam watched it once, then again. She didn't roll her eyes or get angry. She just sighed, closed the video, and put her phone down. Her tea had gone cold, but she didn't delete the clip. Jackson didn't stop there. A week later, he mentioned her again in an interview. "I guess she's lawyer smart, sure," he said, "but I doubt she has a creative bone in her body. You can't fake art, you either feel it or you don't." This time, it felt more personal. Some fans still laughed, but others started feeling uncomfortable. A few even commented, "Is this really necessary? And just play music, man." Jackson didn't care. He was touring in Florida next month anyway. He figured people would forget about it. Here's a clearer, simpler version of your passage. Pam had just received an invitation to a charity event in Sarasota, a fundraiser for kids. Jackson was performing there too. She wasn't planning to speak or be on stage. She was just attending as a donor, quietly supporting the cause. She hadn't played the piano in over 15 years, but something had changed. Later that week, she walked into her guest room, pulled the sheet off her old upright piano, and ran her fingers over the keys. It was out of tune, stiff from years of not being played. She smiled to herself, then picked up her phone. "Hey, Dan," she said, calling her old piano teacher from law school. "Still tuning pianos?" Meanwhile, Jackson kept joking. "Maybe she'll bring her sheet music." He laughed on a radio show. "Who knows? Maybe she'll surprise us with chopsticks." He had no idea Pam had been practicing every day. He had no idea she had already picked her piece. He had no idea she wasn't going to say a word. She was just going to play. When the night finally came, not everyone would be laughing. For years, people only saw one side of Pam Bondi: sharp suits, serious speeches, and polished TV appearances. A tough prosecutor, a political figure, a Fox News contributor. Always careful, always controlled. But before law school, before politics, before the headlines, there was music. Pam grew up in Dunedin, Florida. Her father was the town's fire chief. Her mother taught Sunday school and played piano at church. Every Thursday after school, Pam walked 3 blocks to Mrs. Donatelli's house, where an old piano waited for her. The piano sat in the living room, surrounded by the smell of lemon polish and old books. She was 8 when she first touched the keys, 10 when she fell in love with Chopin. Mrs. Donatelli was strict. She would tap the piano bench with a ruler whenever Pam slouched or let her fingers drop. "Feel the space," she'd say. "Don't just press notes, tell the truth." By 15, Pam was playing sonatas from memory. At 16, she competed in the Tampa Bay Youth Music Competition. She was seconds away from winning, until she froze mid-measure during a Debussy piece. That moment haunted her. She still remembered the silence in the room when "Here's a clearer and more concise version of your passage." She stood up and walked off stage without finishing. She didn't cry. She just folded the program into a neat square and kept it in her wallet for years. But life had other plans. Her parents split. College came fast. The music inside her grew quieter. She studied criminology, then law. She told herself she'd return to music when things settled down, but they never did. Years passed. Courtrooms, campaign trails, her piano sat in the guest room, gathering dust beneath old books and framed photos. People stopped asking about her hobbies. Most assumed she didn't have any. Even her closest colleagues never knew about the piano. Except for one person, Grant Hallberg. Grant had been a deputy prosecutor, a few years younger, with a quiet way about him. During a tough case in 2007, they worked late nights together. One evening, over bad takeout, he noticed sheet music sticking out of her briefcase. "You play?" he asked. "Used to," she said. "What piece?" She hesitated. "Nocturne in C-sharp minor." His eyes widened. "That's not beginner stuff." She nodded and went back to eating. Nothing more was said. Weeks later, on her birthday, he left an envelope on her desk. Inside was a single sheet of music, the opening bars of that nocturne, with a yellow sticky note attached. "Don't wait forever." 5 months later, Grant died of a brain aneurysm. No warning. She never threw away the note. Years later, when her niece sent her the clip of Jackson Weller mocking her, Pam didn't just hear a joke. She felt something deeper, that quiet sting, the same one from walking off stage at 16. That push. She wasn't angry. She wasn't embarrassed. She was remembering. By the time the Sarasota charity event arrived, she had practiced every night for nearly 4 weeks. Her hands had been stiff at first, but muscle memory returned faster than she expected. No cameras, no recordings, just her, the keys, and a promise she hadn't realized she'd made to herself all those years ago. She didn't pick just any piece. She picked the one she never finished. Debussy's Clair de Lune. As the event neared, Pam's name appeared on the guest list, but only as a donor. No announcements. No hints of anything unusual. Jackson Weller didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't connect the dots. He had his set list ready. A few industry friends were flying in. It would be an easy night, some press, some drinks, some applause. Maybe he'd crack a joke or two, get a few laughs, charm the crowd. What he didn't realize was that Pam wasn't coming for attention. She was coming for the music. And the stage wouldn't be his forever. The Ritz-Carlton Ballroom in Sarras looked tailored, and every glass of champagne feel a little fancier. The event was a fundraiser for local school music programs, art for the next generation, silent auctions, shrimp towers, and a Steinway grand piano parked near center stage like an afterthought, waiting to be noticed. Pam Bondi arrived just after 7:15 p.m., wearing a simple black satin dress and heels. She didn't bring a plus one. She didn't alert the press. She hadn't been on a stage in years, and she had no plans to be on one tonight, unless the moment called for it. Across the room, Jackson Weller was already in performance mode. He wore a brown suede jacket and an open-collared shirt. His guitar case leaned against a table as he chatted with 2 local journalists and a musician from Miami who had opened for him earlier that year. At first, he didn't notice Pam. She stayed near the edge of the room, sipping seltzer and chatting with a few attendees from her time in office. No one mentioned pianos. She didn't bring it up either. Then, somewhere between the third pass tray of mini crab cakes and the opening remarks, Jackson spotted her. He didn't hesitate. Realized, this was live. This was her. Pam's fingers moved with quiet confidence, weaving through the delicate, shimmering notes of Clair de Lune. The room, once buzzing with conversation and clinking glasses, was now utterly still. Jackson Weller, still standing near the bar, watched in silence. The grin was gone. A few guests exchanged glances. Some whispered. Others just listened, eyes fixed on the stage. Phones were lifted, not in a chaotic frenzy, but with reverence, capturing a moment no one had expected. Pam didn't look up. She didn't need to. The music spoke for itself. The opening passage was light as air, her touch deliberate yet effortless. Each note flowed into the next with the kind of grace that only comes from years of understanding, of feeling, of knowing. This wasn't a stunt. This wasn't a response to some careless joke. This was Summit. He hadn't just misjudged her. He had underestimated her. And as Pam played on, eyes closed, lost in the music, he realized something else. This wasn't about him at all. Noticed her hands moving, her body gently swaying with each phrase. This wasn't a party trick, this was practiced, patient and heartbreakingly real. Jackson stood frozen near the back, arms folded, mouth slightly open. He couldn't place the piece at first, but he recognized the tone, melancholy rising and falling with grace, and something else, sorrow, no memory. He wasn't laughing now. Pam's fingers moved effortlessly, fluid but never rushed. Her eyes stayed closed. She wasn't performing, she was somewhere else. Entirely somewhere only she could see. People didn't whisper, they just watched and listened. The camera phones that had started coming out were now up in full force. You could hear the faint clicks of photos being taken, but even those sounds felt muted, like the room didn't want to break the spell. And Jackson, he was remembering something too. A night 10 years ago in San Francisco, a club with 20 people, his guitar slipping in his hands because he was so nervous his fingers kept missing the right chords. He wanted to quit mid-song, but a woman in the back row had started swaying to the music anyway, smiling like she could. Wrote back that same night, "Do it, and don't wait forever." Then she closed her laptop, walked into her guest room, and sat down at the piano. No cameras, no audience, no expectations. Just her, the keys, and the music that had been waiting for her all along. Stared at the message for a long time before typing 2 lines back: "Thank you, and remember the key is not to be perfect, just be honest." That night Jackson did post something. It wasn't flashy, just a photo of a blank notebook, his guitar resting beside it, and a caption starting over. He lost a few followers who called him soft, gained a few more who thanked him for showing humility, but the biggest shift wasn't online, it was in him. A few weeks later he performed at a small theater in Pensacola. Nothing fancy, no band, just him, a stool, and his guitar. Midway through the show he paused. "I learned something recently," he told the audience. "Sometimes we're so busy trying to tear down people we disagree with we forget they're whole human beings, and sometimes they've got more to say than we ever gave them credit for." Then he did something no one expected. He sat at the venue's old upright piano, cracked his knuckles, and played Claire de Lune badly, really badly. He stopped after a few bars and laughed. Okay, I'm no Pam," he said, grinning. The audience erupted, and in that moment something real happened. A wall came down, but not just between two people, between noise and meaning, between mockery and grace. By the end of the week the clip had reached national outlets. It was picked up by CBS News, Rolling Stone, and even made a brief mention on The Tonight Show, not because Pam Bondi was trending as a politician, but because someone unexpected had shattered the public's assumptions without saying a single word. The algorithms loved it, so did the people. It wasn't just about music, it was about being wrong loudly and then being corrected quietly with dignity. One of the most shared comments under the video came from a middle-aged man in Iowa. "I've disagreed with her on almost everything, but that was stunning. I feel small, forever thinking she was just a headline." Another one from a 22-year-old in Los Angeles. "It wasn't about right or left in that moment, it was about seeing someone fully for the first time. That's what stuck, the realization that we all reduce people, especially public figures, to whatever fits our beliefs." A sound bite, a party line, a tweet. But when Pam sat down at that piano she reminded everyone that real people don't fit in tweets. Even Jackson's fanbase, who'd originally laughed along with his piano jokes, turned the conversation around. A thread from one of his long-time listeners read: "Had been underestimated, mocked, and then calmly reminded the world of her death without ever clapping back." And while she didn't comment publicly, her silence spoke louder than any press release. Jackson, for his part, kept things low-key. No official statement, no interview, but he did share a second post that week, a photo of an old upright piano in a small studio room. Caption: "Lessons resume Monday." He'd enrolled in private lessons in Gainesville, said he was tired of pretending he knew it all. Some called it PR cleanup, others sought for what it was: growth. What this story is powerful. It's about grace, humility, and the quiet strength of authenticity. It's not just about Pam or Jackson, it's about all of us, how we judge, how we listen, and how we show up. Would you like to refine this into a polished essay, a narrative article, or a script for a video? I can help shape it into whatever format suits your vision best.